Everyone thinks Light Yagami was the villain, but the truth is, someone else taught him how to become one. By the end of this video, you'll understand who truly corrupted Death Note, and why the story was never about good versus evil. The real villain of Death Note power was never the answer. Light Yagami didn't want chaos. He wanted order. He wanted a world that made sense. A world where bad people disappeared and good people could breathe. That desire didn't come from cruelty. It came from disappointment, from looking at society and feeling smarter than it, cleaner than it, above it. Light wasn't born broken. He was bored, and boredom is dangerous when paired with brilliance. Before the notebook, Light was empty in a quiet way. Perfect grades, a respected family, a future already written. And yet, nothing challenged him. Nothing scared him. Nothing made him feel alive. He didn't crave power yet. He craved meaning, something to prove that his mind mattered, something to justify the weight of his own intelligence. Then the notebook fell into his life like an answer pretending to be a test. At first, Light hesitated. He questioned it. He even felt fear. But that fear didn't stop him. It invited him. Because deep down, Light didn't ask whether he should use the Death Note. He asked whether he could afford not to. Because if this power existed, and he ignored it, then what did that say about him? This is where the real conflict begins. Not between Light and criminals, but between Light and the idea of restraint. Every name he wrote pushed him closer to a version of himself he couldn't walk back from. And with every step, the line between justice and ego blurred. Not because Light was evil, but because power never stays neutral. Ryuk didn't force Light. He didn't guide him. He didn't stop him either. He watched, and that watching mattered. Because Ryuk represented something darker than malice, indifference. He gave Light the tool and removed the consequences. No lectures, no morals, just curiosity. And curiosity can rot a soul faster than hatred. Light's desire evolved. It stopped being about saving people. It became about winning, being right, being untouchable. The world had to follow his logic or be erased by it. Anyone who questioned him became a threat. Not because they were wrong, but because they made him feel small again. And Light hated feeling small. The more control he gained, the more afraid he became of losing it. Every plan grew more complex, every lie more convincing, every relationship more hollow. He wasn't building a better world anymore. He was protecting an image of himself as its god. And gods don't admit doubt, they silence it. This is the trap Death Note sets. It doesn't corrupt instantly. It rewards you first. It makes you feel special, chosen, necessary. It whispers that no one else could handle this burden like you can. And once you believe that, you stop questioning yourself. You start justifying everything. Light didn't descend into darkness alone. The notebook taught him how. By offering power without accountability. By turning morality into math. By making human lives feel like variables in an equation only he could solve. This wasn't madness. It was gradual erosion, and erosion feels natural while it's happening. The tragedy is that Light thought he was creating peace. But peace built on fear is just silence waiting to break. And deep down, Light knew that. That's why he couldn't stop. Because stopping would mean admitting the world never needed him this way. That he wasn't a savior, just a man with a pen and too much certainty. And this is where the real villain reveals itself. Not Light. Not L, not even Ryuk, but the idea that absolute power can ever be held by someone who believes they deserve it. Because the moment you believe that, you're already lost. Light kept telling himself the same lie, that he was in control. But control was the illusion the Death Note sold best. Every choice felt intentional, every sacrifice felt necessary, and every step forward felt irreversible. This is how power reshapes identity. Not by force, but by repetition. You do something once and feel guilt. You do it twice and feel logic. You do it enough times and it feels like truth. Light didn't lose his humanity all at once. He traded it slowly, piece by piece, for certainty. The notebook rewarded obedience, not morality. It never asked why, only how fast, how clever, how far. This is why Nier and L mattered, not as heroes, but as mirrors. They reminded Light of limitation, of doubt, of being human. And that terrified him more than death, because doubt threatens identity, and Light's identity was built on being right, being superior, being necessary. Psychologically, this is control trauma. When someone feels powerless internally, they seek absolute authority externally, not to dominate others, but to silence fear. Light feared insignificance, feared returning to that bored boy staring at a ceiling. So he kept writing. The Death Note didn't create that fear. It exploited it. This is the painful truth. Light was never free. He was performing freedom, because real freedom includes restraint, and restraint felt like weakness to him. So when the end came, when the plans collapsed, when the world finally stopped listening, there was no God left, only a frightened human being, begging, running, denial cracking with every breath. That moment isn't a villain's defeat. It's a lie being exposed, because if Light was truly justice, he wouldn't have been afraid of judgment, and that's where this story reaches you, because you've felt this too, the urge to control, to be certain, to simplify the world into right and wrong. Sometimes we don't want fairness, we want power to stop the noise, to end uncertainty, to feel important, but certainty is seductive and dangerous. Death Note isn't asking who is evil, it's asking who decides. And the moment you believe the answer is you, you've already become what you fear. Light wasn't the monster, he was the experiment. A warning about what happens when intelligence outruns humility, when power arrives before wisdom, when control replaces connection. That's why this story still lingers. It doesn't scream, it whispers, it asks quietly, what would you do with that notebook? And what would it do to you? You see this pattern outside anime too, in quieter ways every day, when people confuse control for confidence and certainty for strength. When leaders stop listening and start declaring, when fear dresses itself as purpose and calls itself destiny. When being right matters itself as purpose and calls itself destiny. More than being kind and winning replaces understanding. This is how good intentions rot slowly, not with hatred but with applause and agreement, until no one questions the cost anymore. And by the time silence feels like peace, it is already too late to remember what honesty sounded like, because the moment power stops trembling, it stops caring and starts consuming everything around it, including the person who believed they were different from the very beginning of their choice, even before the first name was written down in ink, and silence spreads. Because in the end, the real villain was never a person. It was the belief that judgment without empathy is justice. And once that belief takes root, the ending is already written. If this story stayed with you, you already understand why. Listen closely for more quiet truths like this, here on Anime Whispers. Because some stories don't end loudly, they stay with you.